Yo yo yo! Hello everyone and welcome to the CT Gaming Lab. I am super excited to talk about this brand new game from Capcom called Pragmata. Some people are calling it Resident Evil for people who don't like horror games. Other people are calling it Dead Space as a reference to another horror game, Dead Space. I haven't played either of those games, so to me this was a game about some guy fighting rogue robots on the moon with his new android daughter. I picked up Pragmata on release, and I've been playing it religiously for a couple of hours after work every day. It's the perfect game to pick up, play for a bit, and feel like you made meaningful progress. That being said, thank you all for stopping by for this review. Remember to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and let's jump into the review for Pragmata. Before we get into it, a quick disclaimer. This review includes minor spoilers related to certain enemy types you may face in the game, as well as some weapon upgrades and combat mechanics. I generally try to stay away from spoilers in my reviews, but if I did that for this video, the footage I would be showing you just wouldn't do the game justice. That being said, let's get started.
Wow!
Would you look at that? Looks a bit like New York.
New York? Is that a place on Earth?
Graphically, the game has proper modern AAA quality. While there was some noticeable ghosting that I couldn't figure out how to get rid of, I stopped really noticing it, especially during the game's higher octane moments. Besides the ghosting, the lighting was good all around. The suit designs for Hugh and Diana are highly detailed and all have their own personality, without sacrificing too much on immersion. In the same line of thought, the sound design really matched the vibe of the game. It really stood out to me almost immediately. I think that the sounds of opening boxes and collectibles match the sci-fi vibe of the game, as well as the clicks and blips while you're navigating the UI. The gunshots of the futuristic weapons all have their own unique sounds, and I love the attention to detail to the muffling of noises in certain sections of the game when you're moonwalking.
Leave the shooting to me. Take this! Right on!
The music both in and out of combat was fantastic. In combat, you're locked in from the get-go as enemy pods slam open and the beat gets pumping, and it's always satisfying to get a bass-boosted outro to finish your fights. I always like to mention when games do silence well, there are great moments of silence when you can hear the groaning of the architecture and Hugh's boots off the floor. There are also a few fantastic moments in the game where you can take in the atmosphere and look at some nice views.
Wow!
Not bad. You can almost smell the nature.
Pragmata takes place on the moon, a very futuristic creation of the moon. In this world, there is a giant space station on the surface of the moon, and basically the entire thing was 3D printed using a new ore scientists discovered called lunum, which is used to create lunafilament. Lunafilament is used to replicate structural and functional data, and as you learn as you progress through the game, it's used to replicate basically anything. You play the game as Hugh, an engineer sent with a team to the moon to investigate why the station has gone silent. You quickly learn that the administrator AI known as Edis has gone rogue, turned every autonomous machine in the station against the scientist, killed everyone in the station, and is now trying to prevent Hugh from contacting Earth. After Edis eliminates Hugh's team, Hugh narrowly escapes and finds himself face to face with his one and only ally, a little girl he names Diana, who he discovers is an advanced prototype android called a Pragmata.
Hugh. Diana.
Yeah.
Hugh. Diana. Hugh. Diana. Hugh. Diana. Hugh. Diana. Hugh. Diana. Hugh. Diana.
After the game's intro, the ball gets rolling and it doesn't slow down. Almost right after you meet Diana, you're thrown right into the action on a mission to send a message to Earth. In Pragmata, every enemy is a robot that was 3D printed by Edis. These robots are extremely resistant to the standard weaponry that Hugh uses, but luckily his new friend Diana is equipped with advanced hacking protocols capable of opening up the enemy's shielding, allowing his shots to deal actual damage. The combat, in my opinion, was, in a few words, fun and engaging. Combat mixes real-time action with real-time puzzle solving via the hacking matrix, balancing dodging enemy attacks, shooting at them, all while trying to navigate the hacking menu took some getting used to. Especially in the beginning, the movement felt kinda heavy, and Hugh felt clunky to control. He doesn't turn on a dime and has noticeable inertia when turning to get him to go the opposite direction. However, this isn't really the type of game that requires precise, fluid foot movement during combat encounters, and the game does provide Hugh with thrusters that do enable those quick direction changes either by dashing horizontally or jumping high into the air. At first glance, it seems complicated and may seem off-putting to some people, but believe me when I say though that it looks harder than it actually is. It's not intended for you to do everything at the same time. When you aim down your sights on your weapon, it brings up the hacking interface on an enemy. When you lower your gun to dodge or move away quickly, it drops that hacking interface. However, the progress you previously made while the hacking interface was last up saves, and you can continue, so you don't have to feel pressured to finish a hack all in one go. In fact, there are modifications to the hacking skill later in the game that incentivize you to spend longer on one hacking screen. For example, the major modification you unlock to hacking makes it so that the more gun damage you deal to an enemy, the more damage your next hack will do. Your primary weapon, while having infinite ammo, needs time to reload, so the combat plays kind of more like hack, shoot, until you can finish a full hacking puzzle. It should be noted that while I believe that's the way the game was intended to be played, I did not do that, and most of the time I was finishing hacks in one go, and then playing the shooting part independently of the hacking. I think that true mastery of the game's combat would involve learning how to shoot while hacking, but in my experience there wasn't a single encounter where I felt like I needed to even attempt to do that. I want to mention that the game does start off slow and fairly easy. Once you start to progress through the game, it throws curveballs at you that force you to interact with enemies differently. For example, some new enemy types will be able to disable your ability to hack, and you have to shoot at certain parts of their body to free up your hacking. When it comes to keeping the combat fresh, there are quite a few weapon selections and mods you can mess around with to create a ton of different loadouts. Combat is all about using the right weapons and tools during different encounters. Different weapon combinations and hacking mods can determine how easy or difficult an enemy encounter is. Every new weapon you unlock feels meaningful and satisfies a unique damage function. The Shockwave is a shotgun, dealing massive damage to enemies up close. The homing missiles are great for hitting multiple spread out enemies. There are tactical weapons such as the stasis net that immobilizes enemies, and sticky bombs to shrink the size of some enemies' hacking matrices. Each weapon can be upgraded to give them more ammo, deal more damage, and increase their rate of fire. Mods are separate buffs to your overall gameplay. Mods range between simply increasing the damage you deal if you shoot enemies from behind, to increasing the amount of time that enemies stay hacked for. There are a lot of mechanical upgrades you can make to Hugh's suit and Diana to give yourself more options during combat. Some of these upgrades can significantly give you an edge, so Critical Shot, for example, gives you the option to execute bots under a certain HP percentage, which is huge for enemies with massive health pools. So yeah, the amount of tools in the tool belt made me feel a little bit like Space Dad Batman. I was honestly shocked by the amount of customizations that were available in such a short game of around 10 hours. Speaking of which, yes, the main story is give or take around 10 hours. I've seen online that some people even finished in 6 hours, and others around the 15-hour mark. There's a lot of collectibles and secrets to find, so your mileage may vary. When it comes to the story of the game, it wasn't tugging at heartstrings, but there was just something so cute about the interactions between Hugh and Diana as they travel through the Luna space station together. I honestly was focused more on finding new trinkets to give to Diana and seeing her reaction to them than the story itself.
Hugh, look! What's this?
That's the Earth. The blue part there is all ocean. Look outside and you can see it from here.
Overall, Pragmata's storytelling is much more subtle and more about the small moments in between, and I think that it does that very well. I did appreciate the environmental storytelling. If you guys have watched any of my other reviews, you'll know that I'm a big sucker for notepads, computer entries, and logs that make the world feel lived in and not just an empty playground. The entries tell stories of the scientists who live in the station, what their day-to-day work life has like, family drama back at home on Earth, and there are even some video logs of moments before Edith went rogue. I've personally always enjoyed environmental storytelling and find it just as engaging as cinematic storytelling. And the world of Pragmata was well suited to find these small data logs scattered around, since the level design was tight with corridors and various small open areas. In a gaming era where it's been open world after open world taking the spotlight, it's nice to take a step back and appreciate a well designed corridor shooter. Having such a tight level design allows players to focus more on the gameplay than figuring out where to go. The benefit of the small levels is that the devs could predict how many resources you've collected, how much damage you've taken, and if you have any ammo left in your special weapons at a certain point in the game. The devs were very generous with the amount of checkpoints they placed around the map, and I do think that the spacing of the checkpoints was almost right on. At these checkpoints, you're able to fast travel back home to your shelter, heal up, unlock and upgrade your equipment, hang out with Diana, and run training simulations for rewards. And I actually really enjoyed the training simulations. Like I said, they offer rewards that can be used to further upgrade equipment, and they aren't too difficult, so you're not spending a ton of time on them. Each training simulation has 3 stars you can earn, and it never took me more than a few tries to fully complete each one. The training simulations actually are really good for trying out different weapons and practicing movement and platforming. In the game, there's quite a bit of platforming. Platforming in Pragmata never felt frustrating, and it really just served as a vehicle to add some more variety and verticality to the map design. The map menu itself is simple, but serves its purpose. It tells you what section of each level you are in at all times, and even tells you what collectibles are still in that section for you to find. The game is ripe with loot and collectibles, some being right on the main path, and others require poking around, and some more are even hidden behind fake walls and puzzles. One of the collectibles in particular is literally just that, a collectible. Hidden in nooks and crannies are the mini cabin bots that you can shoot at to unlock them and send back to your shelter. Luckily, they make a little sound when you're close enough to shoot them, otherwise I wouldn't have found a single one of them. Another type of collectible that I love finding was the REMs. REMs are Read Earth memories that you can give to Diana and 3D print back in the shelter. Every time you generate a new REM, Diana goes and plays with it. It's super cute, and in fact, you're even further rewarded sometimes when Diana draws Hugh a picture. After you collect a certain number of REMs for Diana, she draws Hugh a picture, which they then frame on one of the shelter walls. You can also gain a cabin coin every time you give Diana an REM, which is used to fill out a bingo sheet. Fairly early in the game, you unlock your first bingo card, and there's a big cabin bot in the shelter that you interact with to access your bingo cards. Every slot you unlock gives you a reward, and you also unlock additional rewards for your first bingo, your third, and full completion. Some of the rewards include new weapons, new mods, lore entries, and even skins for Diana and Hugh. There's a wardrobe part of the shelter where you can equip these new outfits, and it's kind of cool that the display rotates around once you've accumulated a lot of them. I do think that immersion-wise, the original outfits fit the best, but I still think that most of Hugh's spacesuits were still very cool, and I did use pretty much every single one I unlocked for a good amount of time. Going back to the game outside the shelter, I wanted to mention another side activity that's prevalent in the game, the red zones. These are challenge areas that are locked off and require keys you unlock via the bingo cards or find scattered around. Kind of similar to the training simulations, these are isolated areas that give rewards for completion. Unlike the training simulations, these red zones are much more difficult and are pure combat challenge scenarios. Whenever you die, including in red zones, you are respawned at the shelter. I understand why this is a mechanic. The devs wanted you to go back and try a different loadout. However, especially for the red zones, I wish you could just hit a retry button with your current loadout. Better yet, I'm not really sure why they couldn't just find a way for you to change your loadout and still respawn at the entrance of the red zone. It wasn't a huge inconvenience as I completed all the red zones on my first few tries, but it would have been nice to still have the option. It also doesn't help that the game slightly insults you by giving you the option to lower the difficulty every time you die. What is convenient is that the red zones are normally placed right next to shelter checkpoints, so it's not a long trek back to the red zones every time you die. I do have another nitpick regarding the checkpoints themselves though. The checkpoints only take you back to the shelter, and you need to pick where you go from there. A small quality of life feature I would have liked would be the ability to fast travel to any other checkpoints directly from the checkpoint I was already at, instead of having to go through an additional loading screen to the shelter. Beyond the few quality of life features I felt were missing, I really didn't find anything else that was morbidly upset about in Pragmata. So, can I recommend Pragmata? Absolutely. The game looks good, runs well, the combat is engaging, the dynamic between Hugh and Diana is lighthearted, and overall, it's a fun, tight gaming experience. I never felt like the game was slogging along. Unlocks and upgrades happen frequently enough to keep the game fresh, while also not too often, so you have enough time to mess around and play with the tools you already have. There is a wide variety of content for such a small game, with the training simulations, red zones, collectibles, and the main story. It all feels well incorporated together to create a well-knit gameplay loop. There's just enough content to keep you engaged all the way through, and it's not bloated with anything beyond what should be in the game. Pragmata doesn't overstay its welcome. However, I would have liked it if there was a little more expansion into the overarching setting of the game world. Like, what is the state of Earth right now, and what exactly is the corporation that created this space station? I did enjoy the flavor text and lore pieces placed around, and within the confines of this game, there wasn't a need for more context of the world. It would have just elevated the game even further if they had it. The sound design and soundtrack are amazing, and opposingly, I also really enjoyed the moments of silence they offered from time to time while you're gazing at vistas. While I am really close to finishing the game, I haven't had time to roll the credits just yet. I am aware of the fact that there is a new game plus mode after game completion, as well as a new lunatic difficulty mode where you start a fresh game with its own curated arsenal. I've had a bunch of fun playing Pragmata. I think it's unique, and I highly recommend it as a game for anyone to play, especially those of you who don't have that much time or don't want to invest yourself into a giant open world game. Thank you so much for watching this video. Feel free to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one.
I want to go to Earth with you. Can I really go? Then I can go see your house and the ocean and real trees.
You bet.